thought they just wanted to scare me. But when I saw the court seal, I understood they did not come to apologize. They came to strip away everything I had built with my own 2 hands. They forgot one thing. I had prepared a list for this exact day. When the bailiff began reading, the room went silent as a vacuum. Then came the sharp gasps from my parents' table. I watched their lawyer's smile die like a cut power line. My name is Maris Caldwell. I am 34 years old, and until 9 o'clock this morning, I believed I was safe. My apartment in Haven Ridge is not large, but it sits on the 4th floor where the morning light hits the river, filling my living room with a brightness that feels entirely my own. It is a quiet space. It smells of old paper and fresh coffee. It is the only place on earth where I have ever felt like myself. It was a Tuesday. The knock on the door was 3 sharp raps, authoritative and impatient. I opened it to find a man in a windbreaker holding a thick manila envelope. "Maris Caldwell," he asked. "Yes." He thrust the envelope into my hands. "You have been served." He turned and walked away before I could even blink. I looked down at the documents in my hand. The bold black letters at the top of the page seemed to scream at me, "Family Court Petition for Guardianship." I stood frozen in my doorway. The hallway draft bit at my ankles, but I could not move. I work as a data archivist at the Northgate Records Institute. My days are spent in temperature-controlled rooms, organizing the chaotic history of others into neat, retrieval-ready files. It is work that demands precision, logic, and a steady hand. My family calls it menial. My mother tells her friends I work in library services because the truth of my quiet, technical life is not glamorous enough for her cocktail parties. I walked backward into my apartment and shut the door with my foot. I sat on the floor, right there on the entryway rug, and ripped the seal. Petitioners Gordon Caldwell and Helene Caldwell. The air left my lungs. My parents. They were not suing me for money. Not directly. They were doing something far worse. They were asking a judge to declare me legally incompetent. They were asking the state of Ohio to agree that I, a fully employed adult woman, was unfit to manage my own life and assets. I forced my eyes to focus on the section labeled Grounds for Guardianship, Emotional Instability, Severe Social Isolation, Immature Financial Management resulting in risk to personal estate. I read the words again. They were not just lies. They were a script. I could hear my mother's voice in the phrasing of social isolation, twisting my preference for a peaceful Friday night into a symptom of mental illness. I could see my father's hand in immature financial management, interpreting my refusal to invest in his high-risk schemes as a lack of cognitive ability. This was not a document born of concern. This was an indictment. A cold, familiar nausea rose in my throat. It was the taste of my childhood. Suddenly, I was not 34. I was 10 years old, standing in the center of our living room while my father dissected my report card, explaining why an A- was evidence of a fundamental character flaw. I felt that old, crushing weight, the feeling that I was a broken cog in the glossy machine of the Caldwell family. I felt the shame of being the difficult one, the one who never quite fit the mold, the system error that needed to be corrected. My hands started to shake, the paper rattled. For a terrifying minute, the gaslighting worked, I thought. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am broken. Then my eyes caught the morning sun hitting the leaves of the monstera plant in the corner. I bought that plant 3 years ago as a cutting. I nurtured it. I looked at the bookshelf on the far wall. I built that shelf with my own tools. I looked at the refrigerator, where my monthly budget spreadsheet was held up by a magnet. I paid my rent on the first of every month. I had excellent credit. I had savings they knew nothing about. The shaking in my hands stopped. I looked back at the court papers. This was not love. This was a hostile takeover. They did not want to save me. They wanted to own me. I stood up. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I was not the scared little girl who cried when she didn't get a perfect score. I was a woman who had survived them once, and I would survive them again. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father to beg for mercy. I went to a digital folder I had encrypted and buried deep in my hard drive years ago. I clicked on a file named In Case of Emergency. There was only one contact listed. I picked up my phone and dialed. The line rang twice. Law Offices of Tessa Blackwell. A receptionist answered. "I need to speak to Tessa," I said. My voice did not tremble. Tell her the Caldwells have finally come for me. Tessa Blackwell does not look like a savior. She looks like a weapon kept in a velvet case. She is a woman in her early 40s with hair cut sharp enough to draw blood and eyes that dissect you before you even sit down. Her office in downtown Haven Ridge is not warm. It is steel, glass, and the smell of expensive espresso. There are no pictures of children or dogs on her desk. There are only stacks of files, aligned with military precision. She did not offer me water. She took the petition from my hands and began to read. For 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic snap of pages turning and the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, she tossed the file onto the glass desk. It made a heavy, flat sound. "This is sloppy," Tessa said, her voice dry. "But it is aggressive. The language here, incapable of rational judgment regarding assets, pattern of self-destructive isolation. This was not written by a worried mother. Mary's. This reads like a hostile corporate takeover. They are not trying to help you. They are trying to liquidate you." I sat in the leather chair, keeping my back straight. I haven't lived with them for 7 years. Not since the dinner. Tessa looked up. The dinner. The night I told them I was taking the job at Northgate instead of the marketing position Dad arranged. I said. The memory was still a jagged stone in my gut. They told me archiving was service work for people with no ambition. They said if I walked out the door to pursue a dead-end hobby, I was on my own. So I left. I have not asked them for a single penny since. Tessa pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. She picked up a fountain pen. "I want you to list everything, not just the big fights. I want the soft threats, the birthday checks that came with lectures on how to spend them, the questions about your rent that felt like interrogations. Did they ever lend you money?" "No," I said. "But they tried to give me gifts, a car. Once. I refused it because Dad wanted his name on the title for insurance purposes. I knew what that meant." "Good," Tessa said, writing quickly. "We have 2 objectives here. First, we prove you are competent. That is the easy part. You have a job, you pay taxes, you function. Second, and this is the hard part, we need to find the motive. Guardianship is a lot of work. Maris. Parents don't do this just because they are controlling. They do it because they want something specific. Usually, it is money. Sometimes, it is power." She stopped writing and looked at me. "Think back. Have they asked about your finances recently?" Specifically, I frowned, scanning the last few months of sporadic, cold text messages and the occasional obligatory phone call. Then it clicked. "About 4 months ago," I said slowly. "My father called. He was unusually nice. He asked if I had set up a trust yet. He asked if I had a financial advisor. He said, 'Maris, with the market so volatile, you really need a professional.' He tried to give me the number of a guy he knew. He said he could set up a meeting for me." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "And what did you say I told him I had it handled?" "I told him my assets were secured." "You told him you had assets," Tessa corrected, her voice dropping an octave. That was the probe. He was checking the perimeter. He wanted to know if you had anyone guarding the gate, a lawyer, a fiduciary, a husband. When you said no, he realized you were vulnerable. He thinks you are sitting on a pile of money with no one to watch your back but yourself. She leaned forward. Here are the rules of engagement. From this second forward, you do not speak to them. You do not text, email, or wave at them across the street. If they show up at your apartment, you do not open the door. You call the police, then you call me. Is that clear? Yes, I said. They are going to try to provoke you, Tessa continued. They will send sad letters. They might send old photos of you as a child. They might show up at your work and scream. They are trying to get a reaction. If you cry, you are unstable. If you yell, you are aggressive. If you panic, you are incompetent. You must be an emotional flatline. You must be a gray rock. Can you do that? I have been practicing that my whole life. I said, Good. Tessa closed the file. She picked up her phone and dialed a number, not looking at me. Because while we are building your defense, I am going to go on the offensive. People like Gordon and Helene Caldwell do not try to seize their daughter's life unless they are desperate. She held the phone to her ear, her gaze fixed on the skyline outside the window. I am hiring a forensic accountant and a private investigator, she told me, her voice cold as ice. Controlling families like yours, they usually have a fire burning behind them that they are trying to put out with someone else's water. We are going to find out what is burning. For the next 48 hours, my life was reduced to a stream of paper. I did not sleep. I turned my dining table into a war room. I printed 3 years of tax returns, every single bank statement from the last 5 years, and my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. My credit score was 782. It was a number that screamed stability, and I printed it on thick, premium paper. I pulled my lease agreement, my renter's insurance policy, and every performance review I had received at Northgate since I started there. I organized them into binders labeled by year and category. This was not hoarding. This was ammunition. On Wednesday morning, I walked into the office of my director, Lorna Pike. Lorna is 60 years old, wears cardigans that look like they could stop a knife, and runs the archives with the discipline of a relentless general. She looked up from her computer, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. You look like you haven't slept. Maris, she said. I am being sued, I said. I kept my voice steady. By my parents. They are petitioning for guardianship. They claim I am incompetent and socially isolated. Lorna took off her glasses. She did not gasp. She did not offer me a tissue. She simply leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Incompetent, she repeated. You organized the entire municipal backlog in 6 months. A project that 3 other people quit. I need a character witness. I said, someone who can testify to my professional capacity. I know it is a lot to ask. But stop, Lorna said. She picked up her pen and pointed it at me. I don't like bullies, Maris, and I especially don't like people wasting good talent. You tell your lawyer to send me the subpoena. I'll be there, and I will wear my good suit. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat that I refused to swallow. Thank you. I went back to work. I tried to live as usual, but the air felt thin. Every time my phone vibrated, my heart hammered against my ribs. It was a physical reaction, a muscle memory from years of walking on eggshells in the Caldwell house. At 2:00 that afternoon, a text came through from an unknown number. Hey, Maris, it's Sharon from the club. Your mom mentioned you were going through a really rough patch mentally. Just wanted to reach out and see if you are safe. I stared at the screen. Sharon, my mother's tennis partner. This was not a check-in. This was a fishing expedition. If I replied angrily, they would use it. If I admitted I was stressed, they would use it. I took a screenshot of the message. Then I blocked the number. Log it. Tessa had told me. Every contact. Every attempt. I opened my spreadsheet and typed in the time, the sender, and the content. 2 days later, I sat in a beige office facing Dr. Evans, a forensic psychologist Tessa had recommended. This was voluntary. We were paying $300 an hour for him to tear apart my psyche before the court could order their own expert to do it. Do you feel like you are being watched? He asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. I don't feel like it, I said. I know I am. My parents have hired a lawyer who specializes in aggressive litigation. I received a text from their friend 3 days ago. And how does that make you feel angry? I said, but focused. He wrote that down. I hoped focused was the right answer. When I got home that Friday, there was a letter in my mailbox from my primary bank. It was a standard form letter, the kind that usually goes into the shredder, but the subject line made my blood run cold. Notice of inquiry regarding power of attorney. I dropped my keys. Someone had tried to access my account information claiming to have legal authority. I grabbed my phone and called Tessa. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hit the buttons. They are trying to get into my money, I said into the phone, my voice rising. Tessa, they went to the bank. Breathe, Tessa said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. Did the bank let them in? No. The letter says the request was denied pending verification. Good. That is excellent, Maris. Excellent. They are trying to rob me. No, Tessa said. They are panicking. They are rushing. People who are confident in their case wait for the judge to sign the order. People who are desperate try to shortcut the system. She paused. I heard the click of a lighter on her end. My investigator just came back with the preliminary report on the Caldwell estate in Briar Hollow. She said, What did he find, Maris? Tessa said, and her voice dropped low, losing its boredom. Your parents aren't just looking for a little extra cash. They are drowning. There are 3 mortgages on that house. The last one was taken out 6 months ago from a private lender with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. They are in debt, and it is not small debt. It is catastrophic. The investigator's report lay on Tessa's desk like a grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. It was Monday afternoon, and the sky outside was a bruised purple color, promising a storm. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Your childhood home in Briar Hollow is not an asset, Tessa said, tapping the paper with a perfectly manicured fingernail. It is a sinkhole. I leaned in to read the summary. The house, a sprawling colonial that my mother treated like a palace, had been refinanced 3 times in the last 4 years. There were notices of late payments. There was a lien against the property from a private creditor I had never heard of. It gets worse, Tessa continued, her voice devoid of sympathy. Your father's consulting firm, the Caldwell Meridian Group. They are facing a massive liability lawsuit for breach of contract. A client claims his advice cost them over $2 million. If he loses, he is bankrupt. And your mother. She has been quietly liquidating her closet, vintage handbags, jewelry, even the silver service set. She is selling them through a third-party broker in Chicago so her friends at the country club do not find out. I sat back, the leather chair creaking under me. The picture was coming into focus, sharp and ugly. My parents were not just controlling, they were broke. They were drowning in debt and trying to maintain a facade of wealth that had long since crumbled. This is not about my mental health, I whispered. No, Tessa said. It never was. You are not a daughter to them right now. You are a life raft. If they get guardianship, they control your assets. They can use your credit, your savings, and your clean financial record to plug the holes in their own sinking ship. They will drain you dry to save their reputation. I felt a flash of rage, hot and sudden, but I pushed it down. So we use this. We show the judge they are broke. Not yet, Tessa said, closing the folder. If we reveal what we know now, they will come up with an excuse. They will say they are victimized by the market. They will cry. We need them to commit to their lie first. We let them stand up in court and paint you as the unstable, irresponsible child. We let them swear under oath that their only motivation is love, and once they have nailed themselves to that cross, then we show the judge exactly who the irresponsible ones are. That evening, my phone rang. The screen displayed unknown caller. Against my better judgment, I picked it up but said nothing. Maris. The voice was soft, dripping with a practiced tenderness that made my skin crawl. It was my father. Maris. Please don't hang up. We just want to protect you. We know you are struggling. We can fix this. My thumb hovered over the end call button. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream at him, to tell him I knew about the mortgages and the lawsuit. I wanted to ask him how he dared to call me unstable when he was the one gambling with money he did not have. But I remembered Tessa's order. Gray rock. Be a stone. I did not say a word. I tapped the screen to record the call duration. Then I hung up and immediately forwarded the call log to Tessa. He called. I texted her. Good. She replied instantly. Prepare yourself. That was the soft approach. Next comes the emotional warfare. In court, they are going to cry. They are going to tell stories about when you were 6 years old and fell off your bike. They are going to weaponize your childhood to make you look small and helpless. For the next 3 days, I practiced existing as a void. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. I rehearsed answering questions with zero inflection. Yes. No. I do not recall. I practiced breathing in for 4 counts and out for 4 counts, keeping my eyes dead, refusing to let a single spark of anger or sadness show on my face. 2 days before the hearing, I sat in Tessa's office for our final prep. She slid a new document across the desk toward me. I need you to do one more thing, she said. This is the most critical piece of the puzzle. I looked at the header verified inventory of assets and personal property. You want me to list everything I own? I asked. My bank accounts are already in the file. Not just the accounts, Tessa said, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intelligence. Everything. The collectibles. The rare items. The things they think are worthless junk. I want every single thing appraised by a certified third party, and I want it notarized. Why, I asked. If the goal is to show I am normal, why does it matter if I have old papers or a car? Tessa smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Because, Maris, nothing destroys a liar faster than greed. We are going to put a pile of gold on the table and watch them lose their composure trying to grab it. The courtroom in Haven Ridge was smaller than I expected. It felt less like a hall of justice and more like a sealed box designed to suffocate the truth. The air was thick with the smell of lemon floor wax and old, drying cedar. The silence in the room was heavy, making every small sound feel aggressive. The rhythmic click of the court reporter's machine sounded like a metronome counting down the seconds of my life. The squeak of a shoe on the linoleum sounded like a scream. At the plaintiff's table, my parents sat like statues carved from grief and expensive wool. Gordon wore his navy blazer, the one he saved for church and board meetings. Helene was in a pale blue suit, a color carefully chosen to make her look fragile and maternal. Beside them sat their lawyer, Rhett Halverson. He was younger than Tessa, with a jawline that was too sharp and a smile that looked like it had been bought from a catalog. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a gold pen against his legal pad, radiating the confidence of a man who believes he has already read the last page of the script. Tessa guided me to our table. Her grip on my elbow was firm. As we sat, she leaned in close to my ear. "They are acting," she whispered, her voice low and steady. "You are the truth. Do not react to the performance." The judge entered. He was an older man with tired eyes who looked like he had heard every lie ever told in this county. Rhett Halverson stood up to deliver his opening statement. His voice was smooth, like warm syrup poured over gravel. "Your Honor," Halverson began, placing a hand on his chest. "My clients are here today with heavy hearts. This is not a matter of control. It is a desperate measure to save a daughter who is spiraling. We will show that Miss Caldwell is suffering from severe emotional instability, that she has retreated into a self-imposed isolation that endangers her well-being, and that she lacks the capacity to manage her affairs without guidance. It was a good speech. If I did not know me, I would have pitied the poor, lost woman he was describing. Then, the show began in earnest. Helene took the stand first. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Maris has always been. Difficult to reach, my mother said, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. She shuts herself away in that tiny apartment. She obsesses over old books and papers. She refused a wonderful career opportunity we arranged for her to work in a basement. It breaks a mother's heart to see her child withdraw from the world like this. She looked at me then, her eyes pleading, but I saw the hardness behind the tears. She was not sad. She was on stage. Gordon followed. He did not cry. He played the role of the weary, responsible patriarch. I only want to ensure her future is secure, he told the judge, his voice reasonable and deep. Maris is a sweet girl, but she has no head for finance. She makes emotional decisions. She does not understand the complexities of asset management or risk. If she is left to her own devices, I fear she will be taken advantage of. Finally, they brought out their expert. He was a psychologist with a neatly trimmed beard who spoke in broad, academic circles. He talked about trends of isolation and the correlation between social withdrawal and financial vulnerability. He used big words to build a cage around me. But as he spoke, I noticed something. He never looked at me. He was diagnosing a ghost, a hypothetical woman constructed from my parents' lies. He had never spoken to me, never sat in my living room, never seen the life I had built. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, breathing in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. I watched them weave their web. It was precise. It was rehearsed. It was a hunt. I looked at Tessa, waiting for her to object, to jump up and tear their lies apart. But she just sat there, her face a mask of polite disinterest. She was letting them talk. She was letting them pile lie upon lie until the weight of it was so heavy that when it collapsed, it would bury them. No questions at this time. Your Honor, Tessa said when the expert finished. Rhett Halverson smirked. He thought we were defeated. He did not know that Tessa was not retreating. She was just waiting for them to run out of rope. Tessa did not shout. She did not pace the floor like lawyers do on television. She stood perfectly still behind the podium, her eyes locked on my mother. Mrs. Caldwell, Tessa said, her voice clear and cutting. You stated under oath that Maris manages her finances immaturely. Can you tell the court the specific balance of her savings account? As of yesterday, Helene blinked. She looked at Rhett Halverson, then back at Tessa. Well, obviously I don't know the exact number. Maris is very secretive. Secretive, Tessa repeated. Or simply private. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you saw an actual bank statement belonging to your daughter? I haven't, Helene stammered. She never showed us. So you have never seen her balance. You have never seen her budget. You have never seen her investment portfolio. Tessa listed the items like she was driving nails into a coffin. You are asking this court to strip a woman of her rights based on a feeling you have, simply because you do not approve of her job title. Is that correct? I know my daughter, Helene snapped, her composure cracking. She doesn't have the bandwidth for the real world. No further questions, Tessa said, turning her back before my mother could fix her mask. Next. Tessa called Lorna Pike. My boss walked to the stand with the stride of a soldier. She sat down, adjusted her blazer, and looked directly at the judge. Ms. Pike, Tessa said. Does Maris Caldwell seem confused or overwhelmed at work? Absolutely not, Lorna replied. Maris manages the digital migration project for the entire institute. She oversees a preservation budget of $50,000 a year. She tracks thousands of data points daily. If Maris is incompetent, then the rest of us are brain dead. A few people in the gallery chuckled. The judge did not smile, but he leaned forward. Tessa then introduced the documents. She did not read them all. She just hit the highlights, her voice monotonous and factual. Exhibit C, Tessa said. Credit report. Score is 782. Exhibit D, retirement savings, fully funded for a woman of her age. Exhibit E, zero consumer debt. She looked at the plaintiff's table. Gordon was staring at the table. Rhett was scribbling furiously. Then came the dismantling of their expert. Tessa walked up to the psychologist my parents had hired. "Dr. Evans," she said, "your report suggests Maris suffers from debilitating social anxiety. How long was your clinical interview with her?" The doctor shifted in his seat. As I stated, I was engaged to review the file provided by the parents. I did not conduct a direct interview. "So," Tessa said, letting the word hang in the air, "you are diagnosing a patient you have never met, based on the testimony of the people trying to control her money. In my profession, we call that hearsay. What do you call it in yours?" "Malpractice objection," Rhett shouted. "Withdrawn," Tessa said calmly. She had already drawn blood. Finally, she called my father to the stand. Gordon walked up slowly. He looked confident, but I saw the tightness in his jaw. "Mr. Caldwell," Tessa said, "you have emphasized your own financial acumen today. You believe you are the best person to manage Maris's estate because of your experience. I have been in finance for 40 years, Gordon said, straightening his tie. I know how to spot a bad investment. Is that so? Tessa asked. She picked up a piece of paper but did not look at it. She just held it in her hand. Then tell me, Mr. Caldwell, how would you characterize your own investment strategies over the last 6 months? Gordon's eyes flicked to the paper in her hand. For a second, he looked terrified. Then he covered it with anger. My finances are not on trial here. He spat. We are here to discuss Maris. Actually, Tessa said, her voice dropping to a dangerous purr, if you are asking the court to give you control over another adult's money, your ability to handle money is very relevant. Are your current assets liquid, Mr. Caldwell? Objection. Rhett stood up, his face red. Relevance. Mr. Caldwell's private business dealings have nothing to do with the petitioner's capacity. Judge Elijah Corwin looked at Gordon over his spectacles. He looked at the sweat forming on my father's forehead. Overruled, the judge said. The witness's motivation and capability are central to this petition. You may answer the question. Mr. Caldwell. Gordon sat in silence. He did not answer. He glared at me, a look of pure, toxic betrayal. Tessa did not press him further. She did not bring out the foreclosure notices or the lawsuit yet. She simply smiled. A small, terrifying expression. She was letting him think he had dodged the bullet. She was letting him think she was fishing without bait. I have no further questions for this witness at this time, Tessa said. She walked back to our table and sat down. Under the table, her leg was shaking, not from nerves, but from adrenaline. She had stripped away their disguise of the concerned parents. Now, all that was left was the greed, and they had no idea she was holding the knife that would cut them open. I took the stand with a strange sense of calm. After hours of listening to my parents paint a portrait of a broken, frightened woman, I felt like I was finally stepping out of a fog. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Tessa guided me through the basics first. I described my day. I wake up at 6 o'clock. I drink coffee. I take the bus to work because I prefer to read during the commute, not because I'm afraid to drive. I pay my bills on the first Friday of the month. Why do you live so simply? Maris Tessa asked gently. Your parents claim your lifestyle is evidence of a failure to thrive. I live simply because I value peace, I said, looking directly at Judge Corwin. My parents believe that success is noise. It is big cars and loud parties. I believe success is silence. I don't buy things I don't need. I don't spend money to impress people I don't like. And why did you cut ties with the petitioners 7 years ago? I took a breath. I looked at Gordon and Helene. They were watching me with the hungry intensity of wolves waiting for a lamb to stumble. I didn't leave because I hated them, I said quietly. I left because I needed to breathe. In the Caldwell house, love was a transaction. You were loved if you were useful. You were loved if you made them look good. I was tired of paying for affection with my obedience. Tessa nodded and sat down. Rhett Halverson stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket, looking at me with a pitying smile. "Miss Caldwell," he said, walking toward the witness stand, "you speak of peace. But isn't it true that you hide your entire life from your family? You refused to tell them your address for 3 years. You refused to discuss your salary. You hide your financial life from the people who love you. That is not normal behavior. That is a symptom of paranoia." "It is not a symptom," I said, my voice steady. "It is a boundary," Rhett scoffed. "A boundary or a wall built by a woman who knows she cannot manage the complexities of the real world and is afraid to let anyone see the mess I have no mess to hide," I said. "Then show us." Rhett threw his hands up theatrically. "If you are so competent, if your assets are so well managed, why the secrecy? Why not let your father, a financial expert, help you?" Tessa stood up. She did not look at Rhett. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Tessa said, "if the counsel for the petitioners is so eager to see the state of my client's assets, we are happy to oblige. At this time, the defense wishes to submit into evidence a verified inventory of assets and personal property. This inventory was conducted by an independent forensic accounting firm and certified by 3 separate appraisers." She lifted a thick, bound document from her briefcase. It landed on the defense table with a heavy thud. I saw Gordon's lip curl. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He thought that file was full of nothing. He thought it listed my used IKEA furniture, my 10-year-old laptop, and maybe a few $1,000s in a savings account. He thought I was struggling. He had built his entire legal strategy on the arrogance that I was a failure. Helene was different. She clasped her hands together, her knuckles white. She looked like she was preparing to weep again, but her eyes were dry. She was staring at the thick file on the table. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the paper like a starving dog looks at a bone. Admission allowed. Judge Corwin said, "Bailiff, please distribute the copies." The court clerk walked over and took the document. It was heavy. I saw the clerk's eyebrows raise slightly as he felt the weight of it. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. I remembered the days I spent with the appraisers Tessa had sent. They had gone through everything. They hadn't just looked at my bank accounts. They had looked at the things I had collected over a lifetime of quiet passion, the things my parents called dusty trash, the things I kept in the climate-controlled safe in my bedroom closet. I looked at Tessa. She was not smiling. She was watching my father with the cold calculation of an executioner. I finally understood why she had been so insistent on the appraisal. This was not just a list. This was a landmine. The clerk walked back to the front of the room. He opened the folder. He cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the small room. Gordon smirked, waiting to hear how pathetic my life was. Rhett clicked his pen, ready to note down my poverty. The room went completely silent. The only sound was the rustle of the first page turning. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for the list that would end the war. The bailiff stood under the harsh fluorescent lights. He adjusted his glasses and lifted the document. The room was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Item 1, the bailiff read, his voice flat and bored. Primary residence located at Riverside Lofts. Unit 9C. Status owned free and clear. Deed in the sole name of Maris Caldwell. Assessed value $340,000. At the plaintiff's table, Gordon blinked. It was a slow, confused movement, like a computer processing a fatal error. He turned his head slightly toward Rhett. I saw his lips form the word rent. He had assumed I was renting. He had assumed I was one paycheck away from eviction. The bailiff did not stop. Item 2. Vanguard High Yield Savings Account. Balance $42,000. Item 3. Roth IRA, fully vested. Balance $118,000. Helene shifted in her seat. Her posture, usually so rigid and perfect, slumped slightly. She looked at the table. These were not the finances of a chaotic, unstable child. These were the finances of a boring, responsible adult. But the bailiff was only reading the warm-up act. Item 4. The bailiff continued, and he paused to squint at the page, as if checking a typo. The Maris Caldwell Private Archival Collection, consisting of 17 original letters signed by Ernest Hemingway, 3 verified first draft manuscripts from the Lost Generation era, and various authenticated historical ephemera. He took a breath. Appraised value by Sotheby's and Christie's independent verification, $4,200,000. The silence that followed was violent. It sucked the air out of the room. Objection. Rhett Halverson shot out of his chair so fast his knees hit the table. Your Honor, this is impossible. We have seen no evidence of sit down. Counselor, Judge Corwin snapped. The document is verified. Continue. I looked at my father. Gordon was not looking at the judge. He was looking at me. He turned his whole body around in the chair. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. He looked at me like I was a stranger who had just pulled a loaded gun from a purse. There was no fatherly concern in that look. There was only shock. The bailiff kept reading. He was relentless. Item 5. Lloyd's of London insurance policy regarding the physical protection of the collection. Premium paid annually. Item 6. Private climate-controlled vault lease at First National Bank. Item 7. Digital licensing rights for the reproduction of said collection. Estimated annual residual income, $85,000. Every line was a blow. I saw Helene's hand start to tremble. She reached for her water glass, but her fingers were shaking too badly to lift it. She had called my apartment a sign of instability. She did not know that the apartment was just a shell and that the treasure was locked away in a vault she couldn't touch. Item 8. The bailiff read, 1967, Austin Healy, 3000 Mark III, fully restored. Owner of record Maris Caldwell. Insured value $75,000. The audience in the gallery let out a collective breath. It was an illogical, beautiful detail. A vintage sports car. A passion project. It was the final proof that I had a life, a joy, and a personality that my parents knew absolutely nothing about. Clatter. Helene's gold pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. She did not pick it up. She stared at the bailiff with her mouth slightly open. Gordon's face changed. The mask of the weary, worried father dissolved. The sadness vanished. In its place was something raw and ugly. He looked at the list, then at me, and his eyes gleamed. It was the look of a man who had just realized he was sitting on a gold mine. He was not thinking about my mental health. He was doing math. Order Judge Corwin banged his gavel, cutting through the murmurs rising in the room. Finish the list. That is the final item. Your Honor, the bailiff said. Total estimated net worth of the proposed ward, $5,160,000. The number hung in the air. I watched Rhett Halverson. The slick lawyer sank back into his chair. He looked at my parents, and for the first time, he looked afraid. He realized he wasn't fighting a guardianship case anymore. He was an accessory to an attempted heist. My parents sat frozen. The courtroom was no longer a stage for their performance. It was a mirror. And reflected in that mirror, clear as a stain of black ink on a white shirt, was their true motive. They didn't want to save me. They wanted to harvest me. Gordon was the first to recover. He stood up, his face flushed with a dark, ugly heat. He did not look at me. He looked at the judge, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. Your Honor, this This proves our point. Exactly, Gordon shouted, his voice cracking. $5 million. A young woman living alone with that kind of liquidity. She is a target. She is hoarding wealth she doesn't understand. This is precisely why she needs protection. She is sitting on a fortune that requires sophisticated management, not emotional hoarding. It was a desperate pivot. He was trying to turn my success into a liability, but it sounded like what it was, a frantic attempt to justify theft. Tessa did not even look at him. She opened the second folder on her table. "Your Honor," Tessa said, her voice cutting through Gordon's noise like a razor. "Mr. Caldwell claims he wishes to manage my client's estate for her protection. However, we believe the court should be made aware of the petitioner's current financial standing, relevant to their claim of fiscal responsibility." Rhett Halverson saw the folder. His eyes went wide. "Objection, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell's finances are private. They made finance the issue when they filed this petition," Judge Corwin said, his voice cold. "Overruled." Tessa pulled out a stack of documents. "We have here certified records of 3 separate mortgages taken out on the Caldwell residence in Briar Hollow in the last 18 months, Tessa read. "We also have a notice of default on a private loan of $200,000. And finally, a pending lawsuit against the Caldwell Meridian Group for professional negligence, seeking damages in excess of $3 million. The courtroom gasped. My mother gasped too, but it was real this time. She looked at Gordon with horror. She knew about the debt, but she clearly did not know the extent of the lawsuit. "They are insolvent, Your Honor," Tessa said. "They are not here to protect a ward. They are here to secure a bailout." "Lies," Gordon roared. "That is a temporary cash flow issue." "We have one final witness," Tessa said, ignoring him. "We call Sarah Miller." The door at the back of the room opened. A young woman walked in. She looked terrified. I recognized her vaguely. She had been an administrative assistant at Rhett Halverson's firm. I remembered seeing her name on email chains years ago. Rhett Halverson turned the color of ash. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Your Honor, this is a violation of privilege. She cannot testify, Ms. Miller is testifying regarding the commission of a fraud," Tessa said calmly. "The crime-fraud exception applies." She approached us willingly. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Sarah took the stand. She kept her eyes on her hands. "Ms. Miller," Tessa asked, "did you overhear a conversation between Mr. Halverson and the petitioners on September 4th of this year?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Please tell the court what was said regarding the motivation for this guardianship." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Mr. Caldwell was upset about the lawsuit. He said they needed liquid assets immediately," Mr. Halverson said. "He said a guardianship would allow them to liquidate the daughter's accounts without triggering a tax audit on their end." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just greed. It was a calculated, cold-blooded heist. "Did they mention Maris specifically?" Tessa asked. "Yes," Sarah said. She finally looked up, and her eyes met mine. They were full of pity. Mrs. Caldwell asked if Maris would fight back. And Mr. Caldwell laughed. He said, "Don't worry about her. She is broken. She won't dare say a word. She is too afraid of us." The sentence hung in the air, a poisonous echo of my entire childhood. "She won't dare." Helene let out a sob. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. "No, no. We love her." But the judge was not looking at her with sympathy. He was looking at her with the hard, flat stare of a man who sees a predator caught in a trap. Her tears were no longer a shield. They were an insult. Gordon snapped, the humiliation, the exposure, the ruin staring him in the face. It was too much. "She is my daughter," Gordon screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. The wood cracked under the force. "We raised her. We fed her. She owes us. She owes us everything she has. The silence that followed was absolute. He had said it. He had screamed the quiet part out loud. She owes us. Not love. Not respect. Money. Judge Corwin's face darkened. He signaled to the bailiff, who took a step toward my father. The room shifted instantly from a civil hearing to a crime scene. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "sit down and be silent, or you will be held in contempt." Gordon stood there, heaving, his face purple. He looked around the room, realizing too late that he had just destroyed himself. He sank back into his chair. A ruined man. I looked at Tessa. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just closed her folder. The judge looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at my parents, then at me. He didn't check his watch. He didn't consult a calendar. He placed both hands flat on the bench. "I have heard enough," Judge Corwin said. The words were final. There was no hesitation. The end had arrived, and it was absolute. Judge Corwin did not look at the clock. He looked at the shattered remnants of the Caldwell family. He picked up his pen, wrote a single line on the order in front of him, and then set the pen down with a deliberate, final click. "The petition for guardianship is denied," Judge Corwin said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of stone, and it is denied with prejudice. I saw Rhett Halverson flinch. With prejudice. It meant it was over. It meant they could never file this claim against me again. The door was not just closed, it was welded shut. Furthermore, the judge continued, shifting his gaze to my parents. "This court finds that the petitioners have engaged in a gross abuse of the judicial process. You came here claiming your daughter was incapable of managing her life. Yet, the evidence shows she has managed to build a significant estate entirely without your knowledge. You did not know she owned her home. You did not know she was a millionaire. You did not know who she was at all." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "That is not protection, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. That is predation. I am referring this matter to the state attorney's office to investigate the potential filing of a malicious prosecution claim." Helene made a sound like a wounded animal, a high, thin whimper. Gordon stared at the judge, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The judge turned his eyes to Rhett. "And Mr. Halverson, you presented an expert witness who had never evaluated the subject. You allowed your clients to mislead this court regarding their own financial insolvency. I will be submitting a formal complaint to the Bar Association regarding your conduct today. I suggest you hire your own counsel." Rhett sank into his chair. His career was dissolving in real time. Gordon, unable to accept defeat, tried to stand up one last time. "But, Your Honor, the money." "She can't just sit down," Judge Corwin barked. "You forfeited your right to speak about her assets the moment you looked at that inventory list, not with pride, but with greed. Your reaction was the only testimony I needed." Gordon collapsed. He looked small. He looked old. The terrifying giant of my childhood had shrunk into a desperate, bankrupt man in a wrinkled suit. I stood up. I did not look at my father. I did not look at my mother. I did not offer them a tissue or a glance of forgiveness. I turned my back on them completely. I looked at Tessa. For the first time all day, my shoulders dropped. The tension that had held me together for 7 years, the invisible wire pulled tight across my chest, finally snapped. I was free. I walked toward the aisle. I heard my mother call my name, a desperate, broken sound. "Maris." I did not stop. I did not slow down. The most violent thing I could do to them was not to scream. It was to be silent. It was to show them that they no longer existed in my world. I walked through the swinging gate and down the center aisle, leaving them trapped in the wreckage they had created. Outside, the air was crisp and smelled of rain. I stood on the concrete steps of the courthouse and took a deep breath. It tasted like oxygen. Not ash. Tessa walked out behind me. She lit a cigarette, shielding the flame with her hand. She took a long drag and blew the smoke toward the gray sky. "They wanted to erase you," Tessa said, looking at the traffic passing by. "They wanted to tell a story about a weak, broken little girl. They thought if they told it loud enough, it would become true." She turned to me and smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. "But you didn't fight them with noise. Maris, you fought them with the life you built. That list, it wasn't just assets. It was proof of life." I nodded. She was right. The inventory wasn't about the money or the rare books or the car. It was the physical evidence of every day I had chosen to survive without them. It was the receipt for my freedom. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the pavement, walking away from the courthouse and back toward my quiet, wealthy, beautiful life. Behind me, I heard the heavy wooden doors of the building swing shut, closing with a sound like a gavel striking a block, ending the case forever. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from. Drop a comment below with your city or country and let me know what you would have done if you were in Maris's shoes. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember, the best revenge is living well.